How would you articulate this line? And how can you develop your own unique approach to jazz articulation? If you watch this video, I'll share some thoughts about that. If you're new here, my name is Chase Sanborn and I'm a jazz trumpet player based in Toronto. I'm talking to you now in the present day, but I'm here to introduce a video that I made a few years ago and I've now re-edited to make it more clear and concise. While I'm talking about jazz articulation specifically for trumpet players, it has relevance for any jazz improviser. This is a logical follow-up to my last couple of videos about the Brass Tactics 660 routine. They cover a lot of the core elements of playing a brass instrument, which includes single, double, and triple tonguing, but they don't specifically get into jazz articulation, and so that's why I made this one. In this video, I talk about how I use traditional methods to train the tongue, and then I apply a specific technique as the underlying structure for articulating jazz lines. I demonstrate at 3 different speeds how I apply that structure to a bebop head like Donna Lee, and also when I'm improvising, in this case on the bridge to Cherokee. The core message is that jazz articulation is unique to each player. As improvisers, we develop our jazz vocabulary by listening to and transcribing solos. And in that process, we also develop an approach to articulation. Just as an improviser can't or shouldn't try to plan in advance what we're going to play, we can't predetermine how to articulate it. We have to get all of that into the subconscious level so that we have the freedom to react spontaneously. So I'm going to let a slightly younger version of myself go into greater detail, but just before I do, all the content that you see on this channel about brass playing, jazz improvisation, jazz history, and other aspects of playing music for fun or profit are completely free. There are no paid courses or memberships. To the extent that I derive any revenue from this work, it comes from books and other items for sale on my website, and also people that come to me for online lessons. When you do that, you support the channel, but more important, you support your own musical growth. And you can find out more at chasesanborn.com. Right then, on with the show. Here's Chase. For jazz trumpet players, your style of articulation is as unique as your tone quality. The sheer variety of articulation is much greater with jazz players than it is with classical players. From the doodle tongue of Clark Terry to the bop style of Dizzy Gillespie, the hard-edged articulation of Lee Morgan, the deftly articulate Clifford Brown, the impeccable technique of Wynton Marsalis, this is a huge range of articulation styles. Another big difference between jazz and classical is that the pedagogy for developing jazz articulation is nowhere near as clear-cut. Now, that doesn't mean that nobody's tried to teach the techniques of jazz articulation. Heck, I'm doing that in this video. But the difference is between performing a composed piece of music where the articulation can be notated and practiced ahead of time and improvising, where all that has to happen on the fly. So then the question is, how do you develop your jazz articulation? Well, the answer to my mind is that you use all the traditional methods like Arbin's and Clark's to train your tongue, and then you try to copy various jazz players as closely as possible. Now, you probably won't, and you probably shouldn't try to figure out the articulation of every single note in a jazz solo. It's just a part of the sound that you hear and that you're trying to copy. But the better trained that you are in a classical sense, the better equipped that you'll be to reproduce what you hear from jazz players. So here's an example of an Arbin-style exercise, applying various combinations of tonguing and slurring to a simple scale pattern. Now, the last variation that I played is the one that's closest to a jazz articulation style. In that one, I'm tonguing all the notes that are off the beats, slurring to the notes that are on the beat. The effect of that is to produce a slight accent on the offbeats, which makes the line swing. Listen to the difference when I play the same phrase, tonguing on the downbeats and then tonguing on the offbeats. So I think it's pretty obvious how square the first one sounds compared to the second one, and frankly, it was hard for me to record it that way. When you're tonguing on the offbeats, you got to resist the natural impulse to shorten the notes that you're slurring to, the ones that are on the beat. A general jazz principle is that a line of eighth notes is played legato, except for the last one, bebop. A good way to practice offbeat tonguing is to apply it to scales played from the root up to the 9 and back. You tongue the first note, which is on the beat, and the second, which is off the beat, and then you slur to the third. From that point on, it's all offbeat tonguing, all the way up and down, pairs of notes. You got to do it slowly at first to make sure that the pattern stays consistent, because it's pretty common to turn it around at the top of the scale and find that you're tonguing on the downbeats on the way down the scale. You don't have to tongue hard. The line will actually sound pretty corny if you do. Just a light tap on the air is enough to put the emphasis on the offbeats. Now here's the same technique applied to Clark number 2, which is probably the most famous trumpet exercise of all time. And there's no reason to just stick to the major scale like it appears in the book. Apply this pattern to other scales too. While offbeat tonguing typically makes up the majority of my lines, it's not constant. That'd sound too repetitive. I like to use the mental image of a tap dancer, which is actually becoming a thing again in the jazz world. The dancer doesn't just tap out a line of steady eighth notes, she uses syncopation and accents to make it more interesting. We do the same thing with articulation, and the way we do it is a part of each person's unique style. Also, we use articulation to get around the technical quirks of the instrument. Since nobody's dictating how to articulate an improvised line, the choice should always be to do it in a way that it lies well on the horn. With practice, that'll become instinctive, especially if you're transcribing and playing solos. But I often find that students articulate lines in a way that actually makes them more awkward to play, and then we have to figure it out and break it down. If you give me a jazz line or I play one out of my head, there's no conscious thought about how I articulate it. If I'm trying to help a student learn how to articulate something, I have to play it really slow to figure out how I would do it, and then I have to go back and forth between playing it fast and then playing it slow, because my articulation at a slow tempo may not be the same as I would do it at a fast tempo. At slow tempos, you've got more leeway. But when the tempo speeds up, if your tongue is not facilitating the execution, then the line won't sound smooth, and your time will likely be shaky. As in all things, the way I do it is not the only way, but I do find that when I go through that process with a student, they usually agree that my way is easier. To give you an example, I'll play the opening phrase to the bebop tune Donna Lee at 3 different tempos. At the slow tempo, it's easier to hear what's actually going on with the articulation, and at the faster tempos, you'll hear the way that it sort of rolls off the tongue. For the final demonstration, I'm going to do the same thing, playing at 3 different tempos, but this time I'll be improvising on the bridge to Cherokee. At the slowest tempo, the swing feel becomes more evident. As the tempo starts to become faster, the eighth notes become more even, and the swing feel comes from accenting the offbeats.